There are parts of you that no one gets to see, not because you're hiding, but because those parts are sacred. The world will tell you to be an open book, to share everything, to prove your trust. But the truth is, not everyone deserves a front row seat to your soul. Some things are meant to be kept close. Your quiet dreams, your deepest hurts, and the way you truly see yourself. When you give those away too easily, you hand over the power to define you. And once it's out there, you can't take it back. This isn't about building walls, it's about protecting the foundation. Because the wrong hands can turn your openness into a weapon, and the right ones will never need every detail to love you well. Most of us are carrying things we don't talk about. Not because we're dishonest, but because we've learned the hard way that not every space is safe. You can love people, trust people, and still keep certain parts of yourself protected. That's not secrecy, that's wisdom. Life has a way of teaching you that some truths lose their value in the wrong hands, and some pieces of you are too important to be handled carelessly. This isn't about shutting people out, it's about knowing where your boundaries lie and honoring them without apology. When you've been hurt before, protecting yourself starts to feel natural. You notice the shift happen without even meaning to. Conversations get shorter, your body leans back a little more. You choose your words carefully, but not because you're trying to be kind, because you're trying to be safe. And over time, that safety starts to look like distance to the people around you. They don't see the history. They don't see the betrayals, the disappointments, the moments when you opened up and it cost you more than you could afford. They just see you pulling back, and to them, it feels personal. This is where relationships get complicated. You might think you're simply guarding your peace, but to the other person, it looks like rejection. You're not meeting their eyes in the same way. You're not sharing as much as you used to. You're choosing silence when before you would have shared every detail. And if they don't know your why, they fill in the blanks with their own story. She doesn't trust me anymore. I must have done something wrong. She doesn't love me like she used to. What they're missing is that the walls aren't about them. They're about what you've been through. But here's the hard truth. In relationships, the impact often matters more than the intention. That's why this feeling is so heavy. You're stuck between two very real needs, the need to protect yourself and the need to stay connected. If you drop your guard completely, you risk being hurt again. If you keep it too high, you risk losing the closeness you want. And it's exhausting to live in that middle place, constantly weighing, do I share this? Do I keep this to myself? How will they take it? You start overthinking every interaction, and sometimes you choose the safer option, silence. But safety can be lonely. A lot of this comes down to trust, and not just trusting the other person, but trusting yourself. When you've been hurt, part of you starts doubting your own judgment. You wonder if you missed the red flags before. You wonder if you ignored your gut because you wanted to believe the best. So now you become cautious. You test the waters before you step in. You don't just hand over your trust. You let people earn it in small doses. That's smart, but it also means the people in your life might never know how deep your care really goes because you're showing them only what feels safe enough. What makes this tricky is that protection and connection often speak two different languages. Protection says, keep this close, don't let them too far in. Connection says, let me see you, even in the messy parts. And if we're not careful, those two voices can pull us in opposite directions until we feel like we're failing at both. You might notice your partner, your friend, or your family member starting to retreat in response to your retreat. They match your tone. They stop asking as many questions. They stop sharing as much with you. Suddenly, you're both holding back, and the space between you gets wider without either of you meaning for it to happen. I'm not saying you should open every door and invite everyone into your most private spaces. You have the right to keep parts of your heart to yourself. But protecting yourself doesn't have to mean pushing people away. It's about learning how to share in a way that honors your boundaries and still keeps connection alive. Sometimes that means saying, I'm not ready to talk about that yet, instead of shutting down completely. Or letting someone know, this is hard for me to share, so they understand your silence isn't about them. It's about your healing. Those little signals can change the whole dynamic. Another piece of this is knowing who's earned the right to your vulnerability. Not everyone deserves full access, but if someone has shown consistency, respect, and care over time, holding back completely might not be protection anymore. It might be fear, and fear can rob you of the closeness you've been craving. That's where self-awareness becomes your ally. You have to be honest with yourself. Am I pulling back because they've shown they can't be trusted? Or am I pulling back because I'm still living in the shadow of past hurt? Those answers matter because they determine whether your walls are serving you or silently hurting you. Here's something we don't talk about enough. You can protect your heart and still let people in. Those two things can exist together. Think of it like having a front porch. You can invite someone to sit there with you without letting them rummage through your whole house. You can give them pieces of your story, a little at a time, and see how they hold them. You can set boundaries without making the other person feel like they're on the outside looking in. Protection becomes healthy when it's a filter, not a full shutdown. But to get there, you have to be willing to name what's really going on, even to yourself. If you're telling yourself you're just being private, but really you're afraid of being disappointed again, own that. If you're telling yourself they don't need to know, but deep down you wish they understood, acknowledge that. Honesty with yourself is what makes honesty with others possible. And when you can name your fear, you take away some of its power. Protecting yourself is a form of self-respect. But when that protection starts costing you the relationships you value, it's worth asking if you're guarding your peace or guarding your pain. Peace allows you to stand in closeness without fear. Pain convinces you that closeness isn't worth the risk. And when pain is driving, you might win the safety battle but lose the connection war. The truth is, people can't meet you where you don't let them. If the goal is to have relationships that feel safe and fulfilling, both sides have to feel seen. That means letting others see enough of your truth to know the real you. Not the perfectly curated, protected version, but the human one, the one who's been hurt and still hopes, the one who's learned to be careful, but still wants to be known. It's not easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest balances you'll ever have to find. But if you can learn to protect yourself without closing yourself off, you'll discover something powerful: connection that doesn't threaten your safety, and safety that doesn't threaten your connection. And that's the space where love, trust, and peace can actually grow. There's a certain kind of regret that doesn't show up right away. It's the feeling you get when you've shared something personal, a dream, a fear, a mistake, with someone, and later you realize they didn't know how to hold it. Maybe they dismissed it, made a joke out of it, or worse, they passed it along to someone else. And in that moment, it's not just the words you regret, it's the trust you wish you could take back. When you tell the wrong person too much, it's not always because you were careless. Sometimes you're lonely. Sometimes you're craving connection so badly that when someone gives you their attention, you mistake it for safety. You think, they seem kind, they seem interested, they'll understand. And maybe they do, for a moment. But later, you see that what you gave them was something they didn't value the same way you did. And it stings, because what you shared wasn't just information, it was a piece of yourself. The cost of that isn't just embarrassment, it's what happens next. You start questioning your own judgment. You replay the conversation in your head, wondering why you said so much. You start holding back with other people, even the ones who have proven they're trustworthy, because now the line between safe and unsafe feels blurry. And over time, that hesitation builds into walls. Part of this comes from the belief that being open automatically means being authentic. We live in a world that praises vulnerability without teaching discernment. But the truth is, not every ear deserves your deepest truths. Openness without wisdom isn't bravery, it's exposure. And the wrong audience can take something meant to connect and turn it into something that wounds. There's also the ripple effect on relationships. When you share too much with the wrong person, you might notice yourself becoming more guarded, even with the right ones. It's a quiet kind of damage. You stop sharing as freely, not because you want to push people away, but because you're protecting yourself from feeling that sting again. And the danger is, the people who could have handled your heart will never get the chance to. The lesson here isn't to close yourself off completely. It's to slow down, pay attention to how someone responds to the small things before you give them the big ones. Notice if they listen without interrupting. Notice if they treat your minor frustrations with care. Notice if they keep the little details to themselves. Trust isn't built in grand gestures. It's proven in the smallest moments. Telling the wrong person too much can make you feel foolish, but it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you care deeply, and you're learning how to guard that care. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone, but to recognize that your story is valuable, and like anything valuable, it deserves to be placed in hands that won't drop it. When you understand that, you stop seeing discernment as distance and start seeing it as respect for yourself. There's a difference between being honest and telling everything. Some people mix the two up and end up carrying the fallout for years. The truth is, not every thought, not every feeling, not every detail of your life needs to be spoken out loud, even to people you care about. It's not about lying. It's about recognizing that some truths, when spoken, don't heal anything. They don't move the relationship forward. They just create weight neither of you knows how to carry. Sometimes the urge to speak is really an urge to relieve yourself of the discomfort you're feeling. You want to get it off your chest. You want to feel lighter. But what happens when putting that truth out there makes the other person heavier? It might be a comment you didn't need to share, an old wound they weren't prepared to hear about, or a thought you know will hurt them without serving any purpose. In those moments, speaking your truth can shift from connection to carelessness without you realizing it. There are also truths that belong more to you than to anyone else. They live in your private world. Your personal fears, the doubts you're still working through, the judgments that aren't fully formed. Sharing them too soon can backfire because the person hearing them may not have the full context of your heart. They might take it as a verdict instead of a passing thought. They might treat it as a fixed truth when you were still figuring it out yourself. Once it's out there, you can't control how it's remembered, repeated, or used. This is especially true in close relationships. You might think, if I'm holding something back, doesn't that mean I'm hiding? Not necessarily. Restraint isn't the same as secrecy. Secrecy is about avoiding accountability. Restraint is about protecting connection. It's knowing the difference between what's helpful to share and what's better left between you and your own heart. At least for now, there's a kind of strength in choosing silence when speaking would only harm. That doesn't mean you ignore problems or sugarcoat reality. It means you weigh the cost of your words before you spend them. You ask yourself, will this truth build trust, or will it break it? Will it open the door to understanding, or will it close it? And if the answer isn't clear, you have permission to wait. The beauty of holding some truths quietly is that it gives you time to work through them. Time to understand what's really going on inside you. Time to make sure your words are coming from clarity instead of reaction. It also gives the relationship room to breathe instead of suffocating it with things that don't need to be said right now. Not every silence is a gap in closeness. Sometimes it's a sign of maturity. It's knowing that love and honesty work best when they're rooted in timing, care, and purpose. And when you can trust yourself to choose which truths are worth speaking and which ones are safer unspoken, you stop feeling like you're withholding and start realizing you're protecting what matters. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes from knowing you don't have to explain every part of yourself to be understood. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that love means full access, every thought, every feeling, every memory laid bare. And while openness can build trust, there's another side of the coin we don't talk about enough, the power of keeping certain parts of yourself that only you understand. This isn't about building walls, it's about keeping a home inside yourself, a place no one else lives, where your thoughts can breathe without being questioned, where your memories can stay untouched by someone else's interpretation. It's about protecting the pieces of your story that don't need to be validated to be real, and the parts of your identity that aren't up for debate. The truth is, no one else will ever see the world exactly the way you do. You've lived moments that even if you described them perfectly, the weight of them would still be yours alone. you've had thoughts you couldn't fully explain without them losing their meaning in translation. And sometimes, trying to make someone else get it leaves you feeling more unseen than if you had kept it to yourself. We share for many reasons: connection, understanding, relief. But there's a risk in believing that everything valuable about us has to be spoken to be real. Some experiences are meant to be lived more than they're meant to be explained. Some feelings are too raw or too tender to put into words without changing them. And some parts of who you are simply not for public consumption, even from the people closest to you. In relationships, the pressure to let someone all the way in can be heavy. You might hear things like, "If you really loved me, you'd tell me everything," or "I can't feel close to you if I don't know it all." But here's the thing, closeness isn't about constant exposure, it's about consistent presence. You can be deeply connected to someone while still keeping certain pieces for yourself. That doesn't make you distant, it makes you whole. Keeping parts of yourself doesn't mean you're hiding or being deceptive. It means you recognize that your inner world is a living thing that needs its own privacy to grow. Think about a seed underground. No one can see what's happening, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, the most important work is happening in the dark. In the same way, some parts of you need time to develop without being pulled into the light too soon. Sometimes we give too much of ourselves away too quickly because we're afraid of being misunderstood. We think that if we share everything, there's no room for someone to misread us. But often, it's the opposite. The more we explain, the more room there is for our truth to be reshaped, questioned, or even used against us. Holding certain parts close protects them from being altered by someone else's perspective. This isn't about shutting people out. In fact, the people who love you well will respect the boundaries you set around your inner life. They'll understand that you are not withholding from them. You are keeping faith with yourself. That's the kind of relationship where privacy doesn't create suspicion, but trust. Of course, there's a balance. If you keep everything to yourself, relationships can't breathe. The key is knowing which parts are the foundation of who you are, the parts that shape you but don't need to be shared to be honored. Maybe it's a memory that still makes you smile, a private dream you're not ready to risk by speaking out loud, or a personal value that guides you even if you never announce it. When you protect those pieces, you give yourself space to process without pressure. You give yourself permission to have thoughts and feelings that are yours to work through without the influence of someone else's opinion. And you allow yourself to remain connected to your own voice, the one that can get drowned out when too many others are speaking into your life. In a world that constantly asks you to perform your identity, keeping parts of yourself is an act of self-respect. It says, "I am not defined by how much I share. I am defined by how deeply I know myself." And the better you know yourself, the more grounded you'll be in your relationships, because you're not relying on someone else to tell you who you are. There's also a kind of intimacy that grows from this kind of boundary. When someone knows that what you do share is intentional, it carries more weight. Your words mean more because they're chosen, not spilled out of pressure or fear. And when they see that you're not afraid to keep certain parts private, it shows a self-possession that is deeply attractive because it signals strength, not secrecy. The hardest part for many people is trusting that they can be loved without full exposure. But real love doesn't demand total access. It respects the mystery of another person's inner life. It knows that even in the closest connection, there will always be a part that belongs only to you. And that's not a threat. That's part of what makes you human. Keeping parts of yourself that only you understand is not about being unreachable. It's about making sure that when you do let someone in, it's because you want to, not because you feel you have to. It's about knowing that your value doesn't come from being completely transparent, but from being completely you in whatever measure feels right. And when you live from that place, you stop feeling the need to prove yourself because you know the most important parts of you don't require anyone else's permission to exist. A lot of tension in relationships comes from mistaking privacy for distance. On the surface, they can look the same. Less sharing, more space, fewer details about what's going on inside. But the reason behind each is completely different. And if we don't understand that difference, we can end up misreading the people we care about or feeling misunderstood ourselves. Privacy is about boundaries. Distance is about disconnection. One is a healthy choice to protect certain parts of yourself. The other is a reaction to hurt, fear, or resentment. Privacy says, I'm still here with you, I'm still connected, but some things I hold close because they're mine to carry. Distance says, I'm stepping back because right now I can't be close without feeling unsafe, unheard, or overwhelmed. The behavior might look similar from the outside, but the heart behind it is not the same. The trouble is, when someone values privacy, the people around them can sometimes take it personally. They assume the lack of constant sharing means a lack of trust, when in reality, it may just mean that person knows the difference between what's personal and what's necessary to share. In healthy relationships, privacy is not a threat. It's a sign that both people understand and respect that there are parts of each person's inner life that will remain their own. Distance, on the other hand, is a symptom that something deeper is happening. It often shows up when there's unresolved conflict, when needs have gone unmet for too long, or when trust has been damaged. It's not just about holding something back. It's about withdrawing emotionally. Sometimes without even meaning to. You can be in the same room, talking about the same day-to-day things, but feel miles apart because the emotional current between you has gone quiet. One of the biggest mistakes we make is treating distance like it's privacy and trying to respect it without addressing it. When we do that, we avoid hard conversations that could bring us back together. Distance doesn't heal by being left alone. It heals when we name it, understand it, and work through whatever created it. Privacy, though, doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be honored. This is where emotional intelligence comes in, being able to notice the difference and respond in a way that matches what's actually happening. If someone is simply exercising privacy, they'll still be present with you in other ways. They'll show interest in your life. They'll be emotionally engaged. They'll laugh with you, listen to you, and meet you in the moments you share. With distance, you feel the absence, even when they're physically there. There's less warmth, less eye contact, less willingness to be vulnerable. In your own life, it's worth asking, when I hold back, is it because I'm protecting my boundaries or because I'm protecting myself from hurt? Am I keeping something private because it's personal or because I don't trust this space enough to share it? Those are very different motivations, and being honest with yourself about them can help you know what your relationship needs next. There's also a responsibility on the other side. If you're with someone who values privacy, part of loving them well is resisting the urge to pry. Curiosity is natural, but it's not always loving to push for every detail. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can say is, you don't have to tell me if you're not ready. That builds trust because it communicates that your connection isn't dependent on total disclosure. But if you notice distance, real, growing distance, it's important not to let it linger. It may feel easier to give them space, but if that space is filled with silence about the real issues, the gap between you only widens. Addressing it doesn't have to be a confrontation. It can be as simple as saying, I feel like we haven't been as close lately and I miss you. That opens the door without accusing, and it gives the other person a chance to share what's going on without feeling trapped. A healthy relationship will have both privacy and closeness. You don't have to know every thought in someone's head to feel deeply connected to them. In fact, trying to erase privacy often backfires, creating pressure that pushes people further away. But if distance has already settled in, pretending it's just privacy is a way of avoiding the truth. And in the long run, that avoidance costs more than the discomfort of an honest conversation. The balance comes from being able to stand in your own sense of self while still reaching for the other person. That means knowing what parts of your inner life you'll keep to yourself, but also knowing when holding back is really a way of hiding from the work of reconnection. It also means giving others the room to decide that for themselves instead of deciding for them that their privacy is rejection. When you understand the difference, you can stop taking someone's privacy as a personal insult, and you can stop letting distance quietly drain your relationship. You learn to respect the boundaries that keep someone whole, while also having the courage to close the gaps that make you strangers to each other. And maybe most importantly, you give yourself permission to live with both, to be someone who keeps certain things sacred and still stays close enough to be known in the ways that matter most. Privacy keeps the self intact, distance protects the self at the cost of connection. And the work of love is knowing when to honor one and when to heal the other.